Some centuries before the Romans occupied the entire Italian peninsula, Greek colonists left their homeland and established colonies. One of these settlements was founded here on the plain of Paestum in the 6th century BC. But men had lived on this Mediterranean plain of Paestum since prehistoric times. In the soft banks of limestone, using crude implements, prehistoric men excavated tombs for their dead. Inside these tombs were placed vases and other utensils from which the dead could serve themselves in the afterlife. Among the utensils found was a curiously designed salt cellar. Stone tools were used by these prehistoric men. They had also begun to use some weapons made of copper. These black clay vases were buried in the tombs by a later people. They came to Paestum between the 9th and 7th centuries BC. Inside large urns, they placed the ashes of their dead. Several centuries passed. The plain of Paestum became the home of a Greek colony. The colony was later occupied in the 3rd century BC by the Romans. Eventually, the Romans fled to the mountains when marshes covered the city. Thus, the site of Paestum was lost. In the 18th century, however, the city was rediscovered, and a plan of the community was reconstructed by archaeologists. Today, the remains of the city are still studied. This was an imposing tower from which the inhabitants might watch for attack. Set in these great walls were the gates of the city. The gate of the Siren, the gate of the sea, and the easily accessible gate of justice were among them. Paved roads led into the city. The city's central zone originally contained sacred and public buildings, but when marshes covered other zones, homes were hastily built in this central area. In this same section of the city, often called the Forum, is a small thermal, or hot water bath. Far more impressive is this large rectangular swimming pool set in the midst of a larger gymnasium in the western part of the city. An amphitheater located on the north side of the Forum was fashioned from two structures. One of these is a temple. Built in the 4th century BC, this is the oldest amphitheater in Italy and was the setting for many gladiatorial games. The temple was possibly the Roman capital. Each column of the temple was topped by a composite capital. On the temple frieze, graceful feminine figures were carved. The amphitheater was close to the central forum. The forum was the chief center of business and politics. At the southern end of the forum stands the temple called the Basilica, the oldest known Doric temple, dating back to the middle of the 6th century BC. Dedicated to the powerful mother goddess Hera, the massive temple is an example of the early Doric style of architecture. This style was later to reach its height on the Greek mainland in the age of Pericles. Unlike later Greek architecture, these columns are set into their stone bases. The supporting columns swell like live muscles under the weight of the heavy architrave. The Doric capitals, for the most part, are designed like squashed pillows. Across from the Basilica is the Temple of Neptune. Erected in the 5th century BC, this is one of the best preserved temples of the ancient Greeks in all the world. There is a beautiful proportion between the horizontal architrave and the sculptured frieze above. The interior is also beautifully proportioned. A row of smaller columns, called the second order, stands on the larger columns. An even better picture of the temple as it stood about 2,400 years ago will be ours after further restoration by skilled archaeologists. Found near this temple were silver discs dedicated to Hera. Statuettes represented the mother goddess Hera in different attitudes. These are incense burners. Hera is usually shown as a symbol of motherhood. Sometimes she is the mythical Cybele. Sometimes shown with Zeus, her husband. Hera, the mother goddess, was worshipped by the Greeks and later by the Romans as Juno. Many temples were dedicated to her. Today, these temples are in almost complete ruin. But their remains give us some idea of the importance of the mother goddess in the lives of the Greeks and Romans. An unique underground temple of the 6th century BC has been excavated. It is covered by a double sloping roof of tiled slabs. After offerings had been deposited, the temple was sealed by heavy stone blocks. On a base or altar were placed long iron objects, perhaps hunting weapons. Also found in the temple were several bronze vases originally filled with honey. These hydri, or water jars, are authentic masterpieces of the bronze work of Greater Greece during the 6th century BC. A large amphora was also found. On one side, the labors of Hercules are shown. On the other, mythical figures perform a dance. The work of a great Greek master, this amphora was offered to the goddess even though the base had been repaired. Another temple in the city's sacred area was probably dedicated to Athena, the patron goddess of Athens. Its rectangular interior plan is quite simple. The columns are similar to those of the Basilica, but not as heavy. The west facade of the temple is in fairly good condition. This sandstone capital comes from the temple vestibule. This base fragment, inscribed Minerva, was actually dedicated to Athena, as was this statuette. They were found in the temple ruins, along with other religious fragments belonging to several historical eras. Statues like this of Aphrodite, Greek goddess of love and beauty. Cupids on dolphins and joyful dancers were also found. Only a few architectural ornaments remain in the archaic temples of Paestum. Here are portions of a Greek frieze. The design has been reconstructed in this drawing. This seated figure is probably Zeus. It is a fine example of terracotta sculpture. The remains of a tile on the back of this terracotta feminine bust indicates that it was used as an architectural ornament. This statue has shoes like those worn by the Etruscans. This bull is of the same artistic style. Some ornaments were made of ivory. Plates like these showing sacred games were possibly meant as decorations for boxes. Statues were also carved of ivory. Among the few pieces of bronze that have been excavated are sphinxes and other decorations, such as masculine figures. But this little bronze harpy surpasses them all for delicacy of workmanship. This figure was symbolic of municipal liberty. Some ornaments were made of marble. Pottery vases are very common. This splendid amphora was made by a master Greek craftsman. Most of the Greek vases found are of the lekythos type. Scenes of warriors on horseback are frequently used for decoration. The center lekythos is the work of a painter named Brygos. Sometimes other forms of vases are found in the tombs. Hydri, decorated with scenes from the plays of the great Greek dramatist Aeschylus, are the work of the school of another famous Greek painter, Astius. In other tombs, graceful trays are found, splendid goblets, and marriage vases, often with several lids which served a variety of purposes. Silver coins were used in Paestum during the 6th century BC. A recent discovery has been that of tomb paintings. Frequently, the subjects of these paintings are funeral games. Here, a deceased noblewoman is shown spinning. Funeral games take place in her honor. Gladiators struggle, wound each other, and die. A spirited chariot race also takes place. Maidservants and relatives grieve and pull their hair. The head of the deceased is supported by a relative. Behind her, the demon of death plays a flute. The dead woman takes her last journey in a cart drawn by mules. Their lowered heads indicate sadness. In another tomb, a conquering warrior is shown in all his glory. The architecture of this tomb is characteristic. It has a curved entrance arch, large stone blocks, and the usual tomb paintings. Various pieces of bronze armor were often buried with warriors. The Italic helmets have tubes in which white feathers were inserted. This one, decorated with bronze wings, was possibly for dress uniform. Antiquities like these are unearthed daily at Paestum through the hard and patient work of archaeologists. Little by little, their work is reconstructing the history of the city. Today's excavations have come to an end. But tomorrow, the work of bringing the past to light will begin again. The task of recreating the lives and times of the people who lived in this flourishing city of the ancient Greeks and Romans, Paestum.